And I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to ask you a question about a remark that I had heard you make in connection with this story about the role you might play in relation to the new Israeli government. You said something like this, and to the degree that I'm distorting your words or your thoughts, please correct me. It is somewhat strange that socialism is supposed to find so many friends and capitalism so many enemies among Jews, when perhaps some people might think that the essence of the Jewish tradition is so alien to socialism and so akin to capitalism. And I wondered, to the extent that you meant much of that, what you meant by it.
No, I think I would endorse certainly that statement as you put it, while going on to say it needs some elaboration in some respects. Well, let me see if I can put it to you in a sort of a different way. My first visit to Israel was made about 15 years ago. I was there for about 3 months as a visitor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And after I left Israel, I summarized my impressions by saying that I thought that the best way to understand Israel was to recognize that two Jewish traditions were at war with one another in Israel. One of them was a very recent tradition, a tradition of 100 to 150 years old. That's the tradition of socialism. That's the tradition you referred to in your initial comments, that it is true that on the whole, the Jewish intellectuals have been strongly pro-socialist and have contributed disproportionately to the socialist literature. That was the one tradition. The other tradition, I said, was a tradition that was at least 2,000 years old. It was a tradition that had arisen during the diaspora and as a result of the diaspora. It was a tradition of how you get around government regulations, how you find chinks in controls, how you find those areas in which the free market operates and makes the most of them. It was that tradition which had enabled the Jews to survive during centuries of persecution by the constituted authorities. You know, the Jews almost never were protected by the constituted authorities. Once in a while, there would be a monarch who would intervene in favor of the Jews. But almost always that was because there had been a Jew who had accumulated enough money through the free market, through capitalism, to have loaned money to the monarch and have gotten him in his debt. The story in the Bible of Esther is not a very usual story. That isn't usually the way it occurs. Most of the time, the Jews have survived despite the opposition of the powers that be, not because of it. And this ancient tradition of 2,000 years is still very much alive at Israel. And what I said at that time was that, fortunately for Israel, the ancient tradition is stronger than the newer one. So the Jews have benefited enormously from capitalism. And yet on the other side, and that's the issue you raise, here you have the paradox. But the Jews have been among those who have contributed much to undermine the intellectual foundations of capitalism.